You might not have the
End colonialism. We all have a job to end colonialism. We're fighting colonialism. Call it what it is. This is colonialism.
And if we are going to have democracy and freedom and justice, it will come as a consequence of our coming together to organize, to take that justice, to take that democracy, and to take that freedom for ourselves.
Uhuru, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akile Anai, the Director of Agitation and Propaganda, as well as your MC for this morning. Make sure to hit that like button and share this video on the platform that you're viewing from. This week, Chairman Omali Yeshitela will begin reading from the pamphlet, Smash, Slander, Build Principled Unity, a criticism of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, which was first published in 1977 in the Spear and 1979 in pamphlet form. You can access the study materials in the description. For the first hour, the chairman will review the study materials, and in the second hour, we'll open it up to you, our live viewers, to ask your questions. It's my honor now to introduce our leadership, the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, Chairman Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Comrade Director Akile. I want to welcome everybody to the discussion that we're going to be having today. And you've already indicated the title of this discussion is Smash, Slander, Build Principled Unity, and it revolves around a political struggle that the African People's Socialist Party engaged the APRP, All African People's Revolutionary Party. And I think part of what needs to be said here. And by the way, you will see names on here like Joseph Waller, which is what I was called from the colonial a period where I wore the colonial name Joseph Waller, and you would hear Stokely Carmichael spoken of, who came to be known as Kwame Ture. But I think that part of what we should understand from this study is the period in which this discussion was happening, this series of articles that in 1977 that became a pamphlet 2 years later. In 1979, this period was a stormy period where our movement was really trying to struggle to overcome the debilitating impact of this war against the revolution, against the African revolution, against revolutionaries globally. It was a period of extraordinary turmoil. And we had gone through a series of assassinations by this time inside the United States and globally. The African Revolution had endured these. The African People's Socialist Party itself was something like 5 years old when this series of articles began. We were created and came together in 1972. In May of 1972, with the founding of with the advent of the first African Liberation Day mobilization that occurred. I think part of what we want to show is that the African People's Socialist Party, and this is just one of a series of articles and struggles that we were engaged in, but it was also part of a period of party building itself. Our objective was not clear overall in terms of what our mission was, but generally speaking, you will see through this study, and if you paid attention to the studies over the last few weeks, that the party, African People's Socialist Party, was truly engaged in trying to bring the revolutionary movement together to solve the problems of the revolution that we had been confronted with. And on different occasions, the African People's Socialist Party found ourselves over and over again trying to pull various representatives of what appeared to us to be a political line that approximated our own. We talked about the pro-independent sector of the movement, the anti-colonial sector of the movement, and how that had to be pulled together. And we actually concretely worked, and you will see that in this statement, in this pamphlet, to try and create a single party, because we felt like critical anti-colonial unity was necessary to win our liberation. You will, if you have been involved in studying various revolutionary processes and revolutionary parties, particularly if you look at the struggle to build the Russian Revolution, which became really important for a number of reasons, you will see that inside this process of this movement, the ideological kinds of struggles that helped to define what would become the leading force creating the Russian Revolution. And the Russian Revolution itself was comprised a process of, there were different kind of contending forces who were involved in trying to get rid of the Tsar, get rid of the oppressive power that was in place in Russia. And what came to be the Bolshevik Party, or the Revolutionary Party that led that revolution, was forged in the process, not only of fighting against the Tsar, against the overall oppression of the Russian people by the Tsarist state, but also forged through the struggle to define what that revolutionary party should be like, And that's what has been occurring here for a long time. The African People's Socialist Party has historically been involved in the struggle to provide and maintain the leadership of the African Revolution. And the struggles that we're talking about here is a part of that process of forging, consolidating the Revolutionary Party that we had hoped would have included the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and there were others that will be at least inferred in this process as well. And so it's in the process of leading the struggle for Africa and African people that our party was forged. And this is a part of how that happened. There were various ideological and political development through actual struggle to solve the problems of a revolution that's reflected in this pamphlet and the work of our party. And revolutionary unity was a question. Organizational unity was a question. And when we talk about organizational unity, we're talking about the process that helps to define the party to the world and to itself. And so the parties don't just fall out of the sky and what have you. They represent class interests. And when you talk about African people, that happens also within the context of the struggle for the liberation of our whole people, defining that and providing leadership for that and building organization for that. All of that is something that's happening inside the context of this discussion around this Smash Land and Build Principle Unity pamphlet. And we talk about this work to build the party, to lead Africa and the African Revolution that we have been doing since that time, also involved developing and mobilizing around a general, not just unity, but strategic unity. So we develop, tactics and strategies for revolution. In the process, tactics and strategy for winning our independence, for building our movement that's guided our work in the African People's Socialist Party. And then as we moved forward, recognizing that we were engaged in class struggle inside the liberation movement itself, becoming much clearer on the question that the struggle for national liberation, within the struggle for national liberation, there's class struggle that's also raging, because the question, the outstanding question in the struggle for national liberation is what class, what social force will end up coming to power as the leadership of the struggle for national liberation. And our position has always been that it has to be the African working class. But the African working class is not the only social force that is engaged in the struggle for national liberation. We should have come to understand that a lot by now, just looking at what has happened in Africa, throughout the Caribbean and other places, where the struggle for national liberation has concluded with so-called independence, et cetera, but no meaningful transformation in the conditions of existence of our people because of, in part, because of the class that has come to power in the name of African people. So this is the basis of the African People's Socialist Party, striking out to lead the struggle, the revolutionary, the movement for African revolution, creating various kinds of formations in the process of doing that when it became clear, as it was becoming clear, that we were not going to be able to win this with the various organizations proposing, suggesting themselves, putting themselves forward as organizations for national liberation. That's why there is, for example, a thing called the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, to pick up masses of African people who may not have come to a revolutionary conclusion, but are faced with the objective material conditions of colonial oppression and exploitation stemming from that. And so masses of people who can't, for any number of reasons, come into the party, and perhaps in some instances are not forces that we want to be in the party can be brought under the leadership of the party, the leadership of the African Revolution, with the creation of International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. And despite the fact that we are talking about people who may not be revolutionaries, they are part of a revolutionary organization that's given that character of revolutionary based on the fact that it's part of a strategic move by a revolutionary party that is committed to and engaged in actually overturning the colonial oppression that African people experience and putting power in the hands of the African working class through its advanced attachment, the African People's Socialist Party. In NPDOM, African National Women's Organization, All African People's Development Empowerment Project, just some of the examples of what we're talking about. And we've moved in various ways to create a certain kind of infrastructure throughout, certainly within the United States, and we're moving in throughout the world in such a fashion that we are constructing the state apparatus, even as we engaged in the political work of developing and building the party and what have you. So this is all of this that I'm just mentioned to you is at least inferred and sometimes explicitly stated in this smash, land, and build principle unity. I think it's really important to say that the African People's Socialist Party has always believed in criticism and self-criticism. We practice this even inside the African People's Socialist Party. And while some people cringe at this because we've grown up in an atmosphere of blaming and avoiding blame, the reality is that criticism and self-criticism is fundamentally African phenomenon. That's part of African culture. It's part of the kind of societies that we've developed, that where all of the members of society are accountable to the whole. There's not a situation where people are just doing their own thing, as some kind of bourgeois kind of democracy, some kind of, people have referred to as ultra democracy, but it's a bourgeois democracy that we're talking about. You do your own thing kind of politics, where Africans, we've come from and evolved within societies where criticism and self-criticism is normal. It's just a matter of accountability, that we are accountable to our society, we are accountable to each other, and we are held accountable. And when we do things that offend or undermine the social order, then we are criticized for that, not to blame somebody, but to try to fix an error and to give the person who's being criticized an opportunity to do that as well. And it's a whole thing that we're involved in relearning that and finding that an acceptable way, because even as we talk about making the revolution and we talk about what is part of African tradition, we live in a world that has made an assault on African tradition fundamental to the success of the social system that exists. That's what a major component of war against the dominated people is, an assault on the belief system, and things like social accountability, that the individual being accountable to the group, and that there is no separate interest of the individual that should ever become superior to the interests of the group. So criticism and self-criticism is something we've always believed in. So we say this is a criticism of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And you will see throughout this process, as we make criticisms, we are also at the same time talking about the significance of it, what can fix this situation, and the criticism falls within a context of trying to solve the problems of the revolution. So though we believe in criticism and self-criticism and recognize there can be no real progress in the revolutionary movement where it does not occur, because without it, you just have a stagnant situation. There's no challenge to prevailing ideas that can become solidified to protect the status quo, won't allow us to move anywhere. So despite the fact that we believe in criticism and we believe in self-criticism, doesn't mean that we run around just looking for every opportunity to criticize people with whom we have differences, or organizations with which we have differences, because we know that there are differences there. But if there were no differences, then everybody would be in the African People's Socialist Party. We know that differences do exist, and sometimes these differences may prove to be differences that we are on the wrong side of the question. That's always the possibility, which is one of the things that make criticism and self-criticism so important. That's how we learn, in part, and through the actual practice is how we learn about our errors. But the thing is, the reason we engage in this struggle, in this discussion, part is to try to solve some problems of the revolution. We're saying the revolution that we're trying to make, and there was a time where everybody was conscious of the need to make this revolution. That's not true today. I mean, you've got people running around talking about Black Lives Matter, and they're talking about police cameras and defund the police. They're not talking about trying to overturn this social system and to replace it with a system where Africans and other oppressed and colonized people will be liberated under the leadership of the working class. They're just trying to find a way to make it better at best, and at worst is simply to get as many likes as they can get on some social media platform. So we're not just looking for reasons to fight. And you can get a lot of likes and you can get a lot of views on social media platforms by doing extraordinary and wild and crazy things, by picking fights, etc., that are meaningless in some regards, except for they're loaded with certain kinds of puerile suggestions that will draw people to it. That's not what we're about. And we have relationships right now with a number of groups and persons with whom we have differences. And we have always fought to devise principles of unity in the process of fighting for national liberation. We can do this with confidence because we are confident that ours we are correct theoretically, politically, and engaging as we engage in the work. We can do this with other forces, confident that the masses of people will unite with the African People's Socialist Party for the purpose of making this revolution. It's those people who don't have any confidence in what they say they believe in who have problems with this. So I want to move forward now. I've talked a long time in terms of introducing this, and I'm going to start with the kind of introduction to the pamphlet. Again, this is something that stems from a series of articles that was in the Berningsville newspaper in 1977, and it was published just about in 1979, August of 1979, which makes that how many years to this month. So we begin with an introduction. And I'm going to start reading now. So this pamphlet first appeared as a 3-part series in the Berningsville newspaper in 1977. It has now been almost 2 years since the first of the 3 articles appeared in the Burning Sphere. Enough time for the African People's Socialist Party to make a sound reassessment of our original position on the practice, style of work, and ideological implications of the occurrences recorded in this pamphlet regarding the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, or AAPRP. Not only are we convinced that our original assessment was a correct one, but a subsequent deepening of our understanding has led us to the conclusion that our original assessment of the negative character of the AAPRP was actually an understatement. We were not entirely unaware of making an understatement when the material in this pamphlet first appeared in the Burning Sphere in 1977. However, at that time, the revolutionary nationalist movement within the US was still under a furious ideological assault from the United States capitalist colonialist government and a significant sector of the North American left, whose ideological assaults and political intervention led the African People's Socialist Party to coin the phrase ideological imperialists to describe them. Consequently, in making ideological struggle with and criticism of the AAPRP, we were conscious of the enemies of the revolutionary nationalist African independence movement lurking in the background, prepared to use any obvious differences within our movement against African liberation. And a lot of that did happen. And those of you who will have an opportunity to look at some of the history of the known counterintelligence attacks made against the Black Panther Party will see the recurring incidents of the US government itself using provocateurs and informants kicking off things that resulted in actual armed confrontations and other kinds of issues and problems. And sometimes that resulted in self-inflicted wounds because of the effectiveness of our enemies. So we say that, and this is just to restate that there were all kinds of enemies lurking in the background. And you have to remember, those of you who are familiar at all with the efforts of the United States government to crush our revolutionary movement, our fight for happiness and the return of our material resources. We're not talking about unleashing rapists and robbers and looters, onto some normal social order. We're talking about people who were fighting, trying to win our freedom and our happiness. And the fact that we had to fight for it is testimony to the kind of society that we live in. So there were these forces that were there and who would crush it, who destroyed it, who were killing people, who were assassinating people. In the South, they were bombing churches. They were, murdering people in the streets, using vicious mob attacks led by police and other colonial powers. Doing that, and in other places, they were using what some might consider, but in my opinion, were not any more sophisticated institutions and entities that crush our movement. They were called police, they were FBI, they were all of these things, but all of them, including the mob violence that was unleashed against our struggle in places like the South and in Chicago, this mob violence was just popular. It was a colonial people state that was happening. The mob were the colonizers, and the colonizers themselves were arms of a colonial state power to maintain the status quo. That's why we had a slogan once upon a time that the cops and the Klan go hand in hand, because both of them were instruments of the state, colonial state power to maintain the colonial domination of African people, except in the instance of the mobs who were doing this. Other formal institutions of the state were able to obscure their relationship to it, so that while mobs of white people and Klans persons were killing us in the South, then people were calling on the FBI to come in, and the FBI did come in some instances. And in most instances, the murder of the Klan became much more efficient with the introduction of the FBI. The point being that both the FBI and the mobs were instrument of a colonial state, the popular state in the form of the white people, the Ku Klux Klan, and the formal state when it comes to FBI, the sheriffs and other things like that. So we say, moreover, as the practice of criticism, self-criticism within the revolutionary nationalist African independence movement is so rare, the African People's Socialist Party had to be careful lest the African people, both within and without the movement, misunderstand the struggle and interpret it as petty bickering, an attack on movement unity, or struggle to be resolved by gunfire, not entirely unheard of within liberated circles. These particular concerns have been overcome, partially by the positive response by African people regarding the articles, and partially by our understanding within the APSP that genuine revolutionary leadership involves a relentless assault on bad tendencies and incorrect practice politic, and ideology within our movement. To do less than this would be an abdication of our responsibility to shed light when there is darkness and to smash all politics and ideologies which collaborate intentionally or otherwise with our oppression and enslavement. During the 2 years since the material of this pamphlet was first published, and again, this was 1977, we're talking, this is printed, and this introduction was printed in 1979. During the 2 years since the material in this pamphlet was first published, we have learned many things which deepened our understanding of the APSP-AAPRP contradictions and which revealed an unintentional understatement of the character of the AAPRP. Most of this understatement is to be found in part 3 of the 3-part series that comprise this pamphlet. When we first wrote the series, we were rather confused by what appeared to be the ideological unity between the APSP and the AAPRP on the one hand, and the difference in practice, style of work, and willingness to take up mass struggle of the African masses on the other. We did not understand the relationship of this difference to the apparent absence of an AAPRP general line. Since that time, we have come to better understand that the political line is that which affirms the real relationship that one has to ideology. We now understand that ideological utterances are worthless and are often only demagogic flim-flam in the absence of a clear political line. We understand now that the basis for the shakiness and often reactionary practice of the AAPRP is the simple fact that its practice is not guided by a revolutionary line. This is not to say that the AAPRP does not have a line, it does. However, it does not have a clear revolutionary line. It has never even publicly put forward a clear analysis of the particular contradictions facing Africans in the US or any place in the world. All the reactionary forces in the real world have concomitant reactionary lines regarding the liberation of African people. Consequently, when we do not have a revolutionary line, we usually end up subscribing to one or a number of the various reactionary lines which enforce our enslavement, notwithstanding our stated unity with a particular revolutionary ideology. Hence, AAPRP's so-called non-confrontation line as it regards to general struggle. Hence, AAPRP's non-support for political prisoners line as it relates to the hundreds of courageous Black freedom fighters who are stuffed, tortured, and murdered in the many US prisons. Despite AAPRP's claim to a revolutionary ideology, its position on these questions are exactly the same as the most reactionary colonialist bosses in the US. Even today, this is 1979, even today, the AAPRP has been known to characterize all mass community work as reformism. It has developed some notoriety within the African independence movement for its practice of critically watching all struggles from the sidelines while only involving itself nationally in the annual AAPRP organized so-called party building African Liberation Day demonstrations in Washington, DC, which have never addressed themselves to the increasingly dire contradictions confronting Africans in the US. The African People's Socialist Party has been compelled to reprint the 1977 articles in this pamphlet because the contradictions they contain still exist today. We believe the struggle is as important as any other to be made. It is not simply a question of our displeasure with the AAPRP. It is a question of our unwillingness to abdicate the leadership of African people to any force or formation, which has clearly demonstrated its willingness to lead the people into the swamps of opportunism and reaction. The struggle with the AAPRP is one which experience has led us to believe will be welcomed by a large sector of the African independence movement. However, it is not the only struggle which needs to be made within our movement. There are others which will not be so eagerly welcomed. They include the struggle against the struggle against intra-movement violence, which only sets the entire movement up for US secret police intervention. They include an ultra intolerance for criticism. They include a struggle against the general abdication of leadership of people's struggles to the primitive petty bourgeois collaborators. They include a struggle against a general sectarianism, which often blocks the ability of a particular good program to be accepted by the entire movement less acceptance somehow liquidates the significance of each formation which did not come up with the idea for the program. All of these struggles will have to be made, not mechanically, but as demanded by the task of our general movement. The struggle with the AAPRP is no less significant, however, because of the existence of other contradictions within our movement. It is an important struggle, made increasingly so by the growing search for answers being made by increasing numbers of young Africans who are particularly vulnerable to AAPRP's influence because of its primitive, petty bourgeois, incorrect, and opportunistic position, which claims students are the so-called spark of the Black Revolution. Moreover, as the world around us is being increasingly shaped and influenced by colonial and subject peoples who have claimed control over their own lives, African people within the US are becoming more aware of the potential for overthrowing US domestic colonialism. To succumb to any advocacy against intra-movement struggle and criticism during this period is to become wedded to opportunism and colonialist collaboration. We choose not to succumb. Finally, although it ought not be necessary to do so, we disclaim responsibility for the historical interpretations found in the quoted letter to Stokely Carmichael from an AAPRP member in the last part of this pamphlet. While the events described in the letter are generally factual, the interpretations and opinions in the letter belong to the writer and are not consistent with the interpretation and opinions of the APSP. We welcome all comments and criticisms of the material found in this pamphlet, Build to Win Independence in Our Lifetime, for our party, Omali Yeshitela, July 28, 1979. And I think it's important to say that we did put this in a pamphlet. We did distribute this everywhere. So it's not some secret comments that we were making, about the AAPRP and something that would deny the AAPRP an opportunity to respond to. Now we're looking at part one in terms of the articles. And recently, especially during April and May, the African People's Socialist Party, APSP, began to experience and learn of various slanderous and disruptive statements and actions directed toward us from the All African People's Revolutionary Party, led by Chairman Stokely Carmichael, from members and associates of the AAPRP. Initially, as these statements and actions were mostly rumors or manifested themselves as simple arrogance or petty disagreements, the African People's Socialist Party chose to ignore them while pursuing a formula for greater unity with the AAPRP, which we see as being in the strategic interest of our struggle for total liberation. Lately, however, the slander of our party by AAPRP members and associates has reached a degree of intensity and viciousness that can no longer be ignored. A reason for raising the contradiction between our party and the AAPRP at this time are: one, to correct whatever misconceptions people may have of our party due to AAPRP slander; two, to halt the slanderous whisper campaigns apparently going on throughout the current US borders and raise the discussion to a political level, thereby making it useless to police agents and our imperialist enemies; and three, to continue the APSP search for unity with the AAPRP and all progressive pro-independence forces by raising areas of political disagreement in a political fashion that they might be struggled around principally, not only by the APSP and AAPRP, but by the entire African population, and hopefully advance the entire theoretical and political development of our movement. In the first article, we will raise the immediate manifestations of contradiction between the two parties, which later articles will deal with, while later articles will deal with what we believe to be their origin based on ideological differences, which are deeper, though less apparent, and which will lead, if unity is not achieved through struggles such as this, to an ever-increasing difference in methods, goals, and styles of work. The most recent manifestation of contradiction between the APSP and the AAPRP revealed itself while the APSP was in the midst of doing work around preparing for African Liberation Day activities in Georgia, Kentucky, and Florida. It was during this time, around April, when a comrade's sister, presently a member of the AAPRP, but previously a member of the APSP, who has long seen the need for greater unity between our two parties, arrived in Florida and began to pursue in a friendly, non-official conversation the problems preventing unity between the APSP and the AAPRP. And it should be mentioned that the comrade's sister was not attempting to represent the position of the AAPRP. She was on a friendly visit to our office in Florida to meet with old friends in our party who she knows from her past relationship with the APSP. Our discussions were informal and general, having the need and aspirations of our people as their basis rather than the particular interests of either of our particular parties. It was during this visit that I revealed to her a letter I was sending to Chairman Stokely Carmichael expressing our solidarity with the AAPRP African Liberation Day efforts scheduled for Washington, D.C., and requesting information of AAPRP plans in order to provide the limited possible assistance of APSP members who might be strategically located in the country where AAPRP activities were occurring. I also showed a copy of this same letter to a leading AAPRP member who occasionally accompanied the comrade's sister to our office in St. Petersburg, Florida. I also held a rather long discussion with this and another leading AAPRP member during this period, at which time APSP desires for unity with the AAPRP were expressed over and over again. I also made it a point to explain to our AAPRP comrades that the question of unity, as far as our party is concerned, goes beyond the question of personalities, but is tied to a scientifically arrived at conclusion that it is in the strategic interest of our struggle for independence that at least 3 of the present pro-independence formations, of which the AAPRP is one, strive to achieve a formula that would result in our becoming one great party. In the meantime, we had already halted much of the APSP-related ALD work while waiting to learn of AAPRP plans for their DC mobilization. Our main intent was to utilize our forces and influences in Atlanta and possibly in Louisville, Kentucky, to mobilize for the DC AAPRP initiated ALD activity, while at the same time carrying out already decided upon ALD activities of our own, which were tied to our work. It was also our intent to utilize our newspaper and other resources at our command to inform people of the AAPRP DC activities and advocate support for them. While in Florida, the leading members of the AAPRP expressed agreement and much solidarity with our unity articulations and the APSP decision to make practical attempts to unite ourselves and other African people with the AAPRP initiatives in Washington, D.C., initiated Washington, D.C. ALD activities. One leading AAPRP member even said he would notify the AAPRP leadership of the unity letter being sent by our party and advocate a leadership unity meeting between our two parties. It appeared to the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, therefore, that a giant step toward unity was being made by our parties. It was this fact, consistent with our tactical and strategic objectives for liberation, which allowed the APSP to keep our politics in command and to ignore what would have otherwise been annoying reports of AAPRP inter-party slander against our party. One such report purports to describe a debate inside the AAPRP leading national committee on whether I would be allowed to speak at the 1976 AAPRP initiated African Liberation Day demonstration and rally in Washington, D.C. According to the report, while a minority section of the leading AAPRP National Committee thought I should be asked to speak, a majority section was opposed for fear the AAPRP could accidentally, quote unquote, create a monster, namely me. The majority section prevailed and I was not requested to speak. We were also receiving reports that the APSP is somehow disloyal and unworthy of AAPRP unity because I was offered an opportunity to be on the AAPRP Central Committee when it was being formed in 1972. But I rejected my opportunity due to opportunism and scurried away from the founding AAPRP meeting to return to Florida to found my own party so I could be in the limelight. However, these and other reports we heard of AAPRP slander and distortion did not disturb us unduly, because of the great measure of unity we seem to be achieving with our informal Florida meeting with leading AAPRP members. We were soon to learn, however, that the reports we were receiving had a basis in real differences between our two parties, and that these differences would surface throughout the country, not in the form of political disagreements, but obscured and buried in slander and distortion. This was to be later. In the meantime, APSB organizations in Atlanta who were losing support and momentum for local ALD work because they were held up while our national office waited for information from the AAPRP concerning their ALD mobilization, were running into further complications attempting to locate a local AAPRP members. I was in Atlanta. We were later to discover that the main person previously responsible for Atlanta AAPRP work and whom we had sought to link up with was no longer associated with the AAPRP. It was only after our inability to make the hookup either nationally or in Atlanta that local APSP workers correctly decided it was necessary to disregard their national directive and push forward with their plans locally to do ALD work. This work included a demonstration and rally in the Band City area of Atlanta organized under the slogan, US out of Africa and political independence for Africans colonized in the US. The Atlanta APSP ALD work was also tied to local and national struggles important to our party and to African people within current US borders, as well as those throughout the world. Participants included the People's Community House in Mobile, Alabama, a local tennis organization, a local community organization, as well as the Committee to Defend Desi Woods, and local cultural workers. The duality of the oppression of African people as a dispersed colonial people and our integral relationship to the struggle to free Africa, our national homeland, was made manifest throughout the activities. Moreover, the Atlanta unit of the African People's Socialist Party presented a resolution to Atlanta city officials, disclosing the unity of African people struggling globally, which also called for the city government to recognize the inalienable rights of African people colonized within current US borders to self-determination and political independence. However, even after APSP Atlanta workers completed their arrangement for local activities, they were directed by the leading APSP National Committee to cooperate with the AAPRP efforts to mobilize for its DC demonstration. APSP Atlanta workers were directed to, one, work together in unity with AAPRP Atlanta activists to organize a bus or buses to go to DC for participation in the AAPRP initiated ALD activities, sending several APSP activists on the bus or buses as well. Two, utilize all propaganda and agitational materials for APSP Atlanta ALD work to notify African people of the AAPRP Washington mobilization. In addition to this effort, APSP workers in Florida, while organizing for local ALD activities, utilized our radio program to notify people of the AAPRP DC plans, as well as direct specific individuals who wanted to make the DC mobilization to the AAPRP member in the area. APSP workers in Atlanta attempted to carry out the national directive governing their ALD work as it related to developing unity with AAPRP. While all propaganda and agitational materials made specific mention of the AAPRP DC mobilization and gave a contact address and phone number, we were unable to work with the AAPRP on the actual DC mobilization, primarily because it developed that AAPRP was not talking about doing work with APSP, but was simply demanding that we put all our efforts into building for its DC demonstration. This was to become clear later. In the meantime, I attended an April 15 through 19 Black Organizers Conference at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, where I delivered a paper on the political aspects of building a mass movement as it relates to our tactical and strategic objectives for liberation. While conducting a workshop, I was attacked unreasonably by a comrade sister around nonsensical questions which were unrelated to the general task of the conference or the specific task of the workshop. Initially, I thought the comrade's sister misunderstood something I was putting forward in the workshop. And following the workshop, I sought to give and gain some clarity with her. However, on the second day, during the presentation of my paper, the same comrade's sister walked in during the middle of it and proceeded with a series of disruptive, senseless, and incredible accusations. They included the charge that my presentation was designed to promote the APSP, which was ridiculous as the paper was completely non-sectarian. And as she had come in at the middle of the presentation, she had no information on which to base such a charge. The intensity and distorted character of the comrade sister's charges led me to initially believe her to be an agent provocateur, until in her frustration, she attacked the conference itself, claiming its validity was questionable since no AAPRP representative was invited to play a leading role. Her attacks on me degenerated to such a sectarian extent that she declared everyone present should simply go out and join the AAPRP, since it was the only correct organization struggling to free African people. I was later to talk to a leading AAPRP member about this incident and explain how it was a disservice to the AAPRP, causing virtually everyone present to raise serious criticisms of the woman, and in the process disclose critical contradictions within AAPRP, which, among other things, made it impossible for them to join it, and which made the AAPRP's commitment to revolution questionable. These criticisms were raised by independents as well as by persons associated with other organizations. I explained to AAPRP leading members that it was I who called a halt to the discussion out of concern that the meeting had degenerated to a situation where AAPRP would be forced to deal with the question of unity with the APSP based on distorted reports flowing from this discussion. The leading AAPRP members suggested the identity of the woman, acknowledged my description of the Massachusetts incident, but made no comment on the incident itself. It was to be later in Atlanta during a meeting between leading AAPRP member Willie Ricks, leading APSP member Omali Yeshitela, and myself that the depth and intensity of APSP, AAPRP contradictions were to be revealed. It was at this meeting in mid-May that Ricks declared that APSP should not initiate local ALD activities. Ricks declared that anyone who was doing local ALD work or of making, instead of making the AAPRP initiated Washington mobilization a priority, was in the camp of reaction. Ricks insisted that all independent APSP work should be abandoned. Drop everything you are doing for total participation in the AAPRP's Washington mobilization. Ricks then declared that AAPRP's willingness to overlook the fact that APSP did not participate in the AAPRP Washington demonstration in 1976, but that there was no excuse for not participating in the AAPRP in 1977 Washington, D.C. ALD mobilization. And nor was Ricks overly disturbed that he was a member representative of an independent Black political organization that was carrying out its own program with its own predetermined agenda in mind, talking to another independent Black political organization with its own program and agenda. Essentially, what Ricks was calling for was total capitulation of the APSP to AAPRP's agenda. Neither was he satisfied that the APSP had been the organization of the two that had continuously sought unity to no avail. It was of no concern to Ricks that the APSP in doing our own work was at the same time assisting the AAPRP in its work so sectarian that in Atlanta, it promoted the Washington ALD mobilization as an AAPRP party building action. He merely dogmatically continued to insist the APSP drop everything you're doing to move all your APSP forces to Washington so they can learn from the revolutionaries who will be there from all over the world. Needless to say, this meeting ended rather heatedly, but not we and the APSP thought antagonistically. Later in the week, however, at a popular club in Atlanta where some people had come because it had been announced that AAPRP Chairman Stokely Carmichael would be speaking, only to find the incomparable Comrade Willie Ricks instead, the contradictions began to deepen even further. It was at this public gathering where Ricks was promoting the Washington, D.C. mobilization that he was asked a question from the audience by a member of the National Committee to defend Desi Woods, an organization united with the local Atlanta ALD work, the membership of which was being ignorant of the differences developing between the APSP and AAPRP. The essence of the question was whether Ricks was aware of the Atlanta ALD effort. The essence of Rick's answer was that it was being put up, that is to say the Atlanta ALD efforts, the party's ALD efforts, was being put up by white folks. Later in Washington, D.C., the site of the upcoming AAPRP mobilization itself, another Desi Woods Committee worker based in D.C., while riding in a car with AAPRP workers, was disturbed by a discussion which insisted there were white people in the African People's Socialist Party. As a Desi Woods worker was not a member of the APSP, she was unable to make an accurate comment one way or the other, but she was able to understand the serious nature of the AAPRP charge coming from one revolutionary nationalist organization and being directed toward another. Essentially then, these are the recent immediate experiences, statements, and actions which shape, give form to the relationship between the AAPRP and the APSP. There are others of a deeper, more essential character, which will be explored in future articles. But in the meantime, there are 7 allegations about AAPRP included in discussion which demand refutation now. They are: 1, AAPRP's internal discussion concerning my participation in its 1976 ALD activity as a speaker. 2, the possibility of my participation resulted in an AAPRP created monster. 3, my opportunism for refusing to join with AAPRP and creating my own party to keep me in the limelight. 4, AAPRP's willingness to overlook APSP non-participation in AAPRP's 1976 ALD demonstration. 5, APSP has no excuse for not participating in the AAPRP's 1977 ALD activities. 6, Atlanta ALD activities were put up by white folks. And 7, there are white folks in the APSP. So our activities are tied to strategies. For the first allegation, I would have been honored to speak at the 1976 AAPRP Washington, D.C. ALD demonstration had it been possible. However, such would have been out of the question, as the APSP was planning participation in ALD activities in Virginia, Kentucky, Florida, and Georgia, and I was already committed to speak at the Georgia ALT activities scheduled for Hawkinsville, Georgia, when the APSP learned of the AAPRP's plan for a demonstration in Washington, D.C. And I should mention that Hawkinsville, Georgia, is the city that put Desi Woods on trial for murder of a white man, Ronnie Horn, who she had killed by taking his own gun while he was in the process of trying to rape her. And Hawkinsville is such a backwards place. It was then, and I'm sure it is now, where the white people had their own individual prisons, their own private prisons where they were locking up African people. So it was a den of terror of colonial domination of African people in Georgia. And that part of our work always has been to attack and fight against colonial imperialism at every occasion, especially when it could make such a difference in terms of organizing African people to win our freedom. So we had made plans for a Hawkinsville mobilization because all APSP work, including ALD work, is tied to our tactical and strategical objectives for liberation. And our party had adopted the case of Desi Woods, who had been tried, convicted, and sentenced in Hawkinsville, as life in Hawkinsville as representative of the most repressive condition imaginable for African people. We saw it as tactically valuable to organize and mobilize people for an activity in that area. In other words, ALD for us has never been just some abstract, purely abstract celebration. You know, it's involved this African Liberation Day. And when we look at what we do, it's always been connected to the question of liberation. Moreover, it was in early April when the APSP learned by accident of AAPRP's 1976 ALD plans. And this was from Comrade Brother Jitu Weusi of the East, who showed me a copy of the press release while I was visiting with him. However, as early as February 2nd, 1976, our party has sent the following communication to various African organizations, including the AAPRP. And this is what it said, and quote, Uhuru, brothers, sisters, and comrades. This letter to you is promoted by the approaching date for African Liberation Day and our concern in the African People's Socialist Party that African Liberation Day demonstrations occur this year and that the progressive US-based African forces take the lead in giving the demonstrations form and direction. We had hoped at one point to initiate a national meeting of African internationalists in this country, make plans for the upcoming May demonstration. However, shortage of resources made such a plan impossible for us. We do have some observations and suggestions to make concerning the ALD demonstration that we hope you will be in agreement with and find yourselves capable of acting on. It is the opinion of the African People's Socialist Party that the upcoming ALD demonstrations will be the most important ALD demonstrations ever to occur in this country. This is made manifest by the present imperialist attack in Angola that has left an estimated 100,000 African civilians in its wake. However, the Angola affairs is only a part of the total African picture, as the Western imperialist forces who are attempting to prop up their bankrupt system of international robbery at the expense of African people make a new scramble for Africa and are attempting to bolster African oppression by propping up the most reactionary counter-revolutionary forces to guarantee exploitative stability. It is the opinion of the APSP that our movement has several different tasks to accomplish on this upcoming ALD date. Among these tasks, in our opinion, are one, to advance the philosophical and organizational unity of revolutionary organizations on the continent of Africa and abroad. Two, to advance the general struggle for African liberation on the continent of Africa and abroad. Three, to advance our ideological struggle in the US against white ideological imperialist so-called communists and their African puppets. Four, to reestablish the hegemony of the African internationalist, Pan-Africanist, etc. movement over the Black liberation struggle in the US. Five, to advance the burning issues important to domestically colonized Africans in the US. Six, to expose the role of the US and Western imperialism in Angola, Southern Africa, and the entire African continent. The African People's Socialist Party will be attempting to come together with various local and national organizations in the states we are working in and attempt to promote ALD demonstrations with the above mentioned task in mind. We are promoting May 29th as the actual day for the statewide demonstrations. The month of May alone presents us with 3 important and significant days to build up for the actual demonstrations and an opportunity to counter any actions the ideological imperialists may plan for the previous weekends. Build-up actions for the actual ALD demonstrations can be held on May 1, International Workers' Solidarity Day, May 19, Malcolm X's birthday, and the evening of May 25th, African Liberation Day. The African People's Socialist Party will advance the slogan, "We are our own liberators in Africa and the US." We feel this slogan captures the essence of the present period of our international struggle as perceived from the US. We will advance other progressive African internationalist slogans as well, such as Africa for Africans at home and abroad. Africa, love it or leave it. US out. Independence in our lifetime. Smash US oppression of Black people in Africa and the US. And Africans of the world unite. The APSP is of the opinion that the progressive nationalists, African internationalists, Pan-Africanists, etc., should immediately take the initiative for preparing for this year's ALD. We know that our enemies will be moving to do the same thing. And it is up to us who have a real stake in the outcome of our struggle and a love for our people to seize the leadership and concretize the aspirations of our people for liberation, peace, and dignity. It is our hope that you will find this suggested outline as one which offers a minimum program upon which we can agree and work on from our various locations and join with us in this attempt to move our struggle forward. Please notify us of any comments, criticisms, or suggestions you may have about our suggestions. Moreover, if you are in agreement with the general position outlined here, please send us your endorsement so we may use it in any ALD promotional material we put together. Strike 1,000 blows for liberation, independence, in our lifetime. So the only point to be made here is that although the APSP would have welcomed a demonstration of unity through an invitation to participate in the AAPRP activity, we were already involved in ELD work when we learned of the AAPRP's efforts. And we have even made a special effort to unite with AAPRP while planning our APSP work. Moreover, an AAPRP invitation to participate in this program would have been an offer to participate in this particular activity that would not have determined whether I participated in ALD work itself. In April 1976, we were attempting to unite with AAPRP around ALD work. When we encountered two comrade brothers in Atlanta who had press releases concerning the AAPRP demonstration, I wrote a letter to Chairman Stokely Carmichael on April 15th. The letter recounted the APSP attempts for unity throughout February 2nd ALD letter, expressed concern over the potential for ALD work by APSP and AAPRP being at cross purposes, explained the APSP goals and objectives concerning our Georgia ALD work, and hope, quote, to hear from you as soon as possible concerning the material in this letter. Hopefully, I would also see you during your May 10 visit here if your speaking engagement comes through at Atlanta U, unquote. When no answer was forthcoming from this letter, I also attempted to call Chairman Stokely Carmichael at a Washington, D.C. phone number he had given me previously to no avail. As for the second allegation, it is difficult for me to understand AAPRP's fear of creating a monster by having me speak at their program. The character of my political activity and my relationship with African people, monstrous or otherwise, was determined long before and independent of the AAPRP initiated 1976 ALD Washington, D.C. mobilization. In fact, I was a member of the National Steering Committee of the original African Liberation Day Coordinating Committee responsible for organizing the first African Liberation Day activity held in the US in 1972. One, by the way, which the AAPRP refused to participate in. Obviously, my opportunity for becoming a monster was much greater than at an AAPRP function. The third allegation is equally ridiculous for a number of reasons. In the first place, it assumes that correct political struggle begins and ends with the AAPRP. It is the stuff from which AAPRP sectarianism is made. It is true that I was invited to become a member of the AAPRP Central Committee in 1972 at a meeting in a North Carolina city, actually ordered is a better term to describe the AAPRP recruiting style at the time. However, political parties are made up of voluntary associates. I had several reasons then for not joining the AAPRP, reasons I will explore with more depth in the next article, but then there are virtually millions of African people who are not members of the African People's Socialist Party. Nevertheless, we have yet to make a political determination of our ability to unite with a person or group, depending upon willingness to accept APSP membership. But contrary to the allegation that I returned from the 1972 AAPRP meeting to create my own party that I might remain in the limelight, I was actively attempting to organize a political party as early as 1969. And the only thing that apparently blocked that effort was the activities of a suspected agent provocateur who successfully disrupted the Daytona Beach, Florida meeting where the party building discussion took place. And the fourth point of contention expressing APRP's willingness to overlook APSP's non-participation in 1976 DC mobilization has already been refuted. It is obvious from the letters, phone calls, and the initial unity letter sent out by our party suggesting a unified approach to ALD work, that it is not the APSP actions which need to be overlooked. In the first place, unity was at the core of our intentions and all our work. But in the second place, the APSP, with all its contradictions, amateurishness, etc., is an independent organization responsible only to the masses of our people. We do not exist as a reserve force for the AAPRP or any other formation anywhere on the face of this earth. Therefore, it is ridiculous on its face for the inimical Comrade Willie Ricks to absolve us from guilt on the one hand, or admonish us lest we run out of excuses on the other. As for the sixth allegation that our Atlanta ALD work was put up by the white folks, It is a vicious, lying slander. That is all. It has no basis in reality. It is a lie. It's that simple. It is the seventh allegation that anticipates doing the most damage, however. The allegation that there are white people in the APSP. This, along with and supporting the allegation that APSP Atlanta ALD work was put up by white folks, is expected to do severe damage to a revolutionary national organization based on the struggle on political independence. We have only been able to find one plausible explanation for AAPRP's allegation, that there are white people within the APSP. And this is the existence of the African People's Solidarity Committee and its relationship to the APSP. It is a plausible explanation because the African People's Solidarity Committee has a demonstrable ideological and organizational relationship to the APSP. On the other hand, this relationship as an explanation for the allegation that there are white people in the APSP suffers greatly in view of the fact that a leading AAPRP member told me in Florida in April of this year that the AAPRP was planning to do the same thing as the APSP had done in creating the African People's Solidarity Committee. Nor should AAPRP be ashamed of the fact that they considered organization of a similar type formation. It makes sense. Certainly it does to the APSP, which is why we initiated organization of the African People's Solidarity Committee. It also seems to make sense to the North American people who now constitute the membership of the organization. Indeed, there is a Puerto Rican Solidarity Committee, a Native American Solidarity Committee, a Palestinian Support Committee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It seems the solidarity support principle makes sense to a variety of forces and peoples in the world, with the AAPRP being an exception in hindsight. After such a formation was initiated by the African People's Socialist Party, persons desiring more information on the African People's Solidarity Committee should check the February and March issues of the Branding Spear. The APSP is determined to find principal unity with all the progressive pro-independence forces within and without current US North American borders. Obviously, such a struggle for unity must include struggle with the influential and possibly the most powerful of us all, AAPRP. Such unity obviously cannot be found by wishing it into existence. It will be a process of learning to recognize the basis of our unity in our struggle to liberate the toiling African masses, while at the same time, it will be a process of principled struggle over our differences with the desire to eliminate our differences, if possible, through development of our theory, line, and style of work. So, Comrade Director Akile, I don't know if I should stop now and turn it over to you, Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, would you want to read the next two paragraphs and stop at part 2?
I will do that. Uhuru. On the other hand, there is no guarantee that political differences will be eliminated. It's quite possible that differences have their basis in our worldview, which is a reflection of our class alignment. It may be that some differences are political cosmetics, which attempt to obscure class unity with the enemies of African liberation. On the whole, the revolutionary nationalist movement in this country has not accepted principled criticism easily. This has been one reason for the long periods of low political and ideological development. There must be ideological struggle for the benefit of our entire movement, which is one reason we have decided to raise the contradictions between AAPRP and our party. Moreover, it is our belief that the general level of political maturity of African people will demand more than slander and distortions. Certainly the people deserve more. For the sake of our people then, for the sake of our movement and our struggle for liberation from exploitation and oppression, let us raise the politic from the gutters and the domicile and natural habitat of the CIA and FBI. Let the need for principled unity guide our ideological struggle. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, I just really, really want to appreciate you bringing this discussion to the floor, this pamphlet, Smash Slander, Build Principled Unity, which, as we've stated, and, throughout the reading, we know that this was being dealt with, discussed in the latter part of the 70s, and published in pamphlet form in 79, but still the struggle that's being made to smash, slander, build principled unity is relevant to our movement today. And it's a really important document, especially for these forces coming into political life, into revolutionary political life. So I just really want to appreciate the opening up of this study, and we'll start with part 2 next Sunday. But we want to go ahead now and open it up for questions and answers from, asking your questions for the chairman. So before we start with that, we'll go into our announcements. We'll take a look at some of the upcoming things. So let's get it. All right. So first and foremost, the study is being brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, where we're winning the war of ideas. For your worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com, order and distribute the Burning Spear newspaper, and become a subscriber today. Get a 1-year subscription, 12 issues delivered straight to your door for $25, or the new digital subscription option. Get a combo of both for 20% off. You can gift a subscription to comrades and family members. You can do all of this at theburningspear.com/subscribe. And since its founding in 1968, next slide. And since its founding in 1968, the Burning Spear newspaper has covered struggles to free African people from U.S. colonial prisons, including historic campaigns led by the African People's Socialist Party. The Spear regularly prints letters and articles by our brothers and sisters held captive and mails copies of the paper free of charge to over 600 prisoners each month through the Mafundi Lake Sponsor Prisoner Subscription Program. Contribute to the Burning Spear newspaper's Black August fundraising goal, at least $10,000 by August 31st, to fund the prisoner subscription program as it grows to reach more and more of our people behind prison walls. Go to theburningspear.com/donate. You can make a one-time donation, or you can become a monthly sustainer. Next slide. There are special thank you gifts for donating. So become a $5 a month Spear sustainer, or donate $50 one time. You can get the African People's Socialist Party's official flag enamel pin. Become a $10 a month Spear sustainer, or donate $100 one time. You get a Spear struggle bag and a pin. Become a $20 a month Spear sustainer, or donate $200 one time. Get a Spear logo t-shirt, struggle bag, and pin. And become a $100 Spear sustainer, or donate $1,000 one time. You get a Spear logo sweatshirt, t-shirt, struggle bag, and pen. Next slide. Also, don't miss the Black August web event, Free 'em All, the African People's Socialist Party's commitment to free our political prisoners then and now. Taking place Saturday, August 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern. It is hosted by the Burning Spear newspaper, where I'll be your MC. We have a special guest speaker, Columbai and Danette, the president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. It'll also be featuring members of the Burning Spear newspaper staff, who will be presenting on the African People's Socialist Party's historic struggles to end the colonial imprisonment of African people and to free African political prisoners. You can register for this event at tinyurl.com/blackaugust2k21. Next. Omali Taught Me airs on Black Power 96 FM radio, a project of the African People's Education and Defense Fund, with the slogan, not just explaining the world, but changing it. Listen on 96.3 FM in St. Petersburg, Florida, or streaming online at blackpower96.org and on the free Black Power 96 mobile app. The theory of African internationalism is a theory of practice. All the energy of the African People's Socialist Party is focused on the destruction of colonial capitalism. Africans of the world, go to our website, apspuhuru.org, and fill out our contact form. And today, August 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern, join the Harriet's Daughters Virtual Book Club hosted by the African National Women's Organization, featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela's political report to the African People's Socialist Party's U.S. 6th Congress, groundbreaking political analysis that shows the way forward for people looking for answers during this period of the crisis of imperialism, a crisis that offers great opportunity for colonized peoples everywhere. Find this event on theburningspear.com/events calendar to get the Zoom registration link. Next, African women throughout the U.S. have been reeling from the ongoing kidnap of their children by the colonial state agency known as Child Protective Services. The Colonial States Child Protective Service, CPS, is an oppressive entity that oversees the state-sponsored kidnapping of our children all over the country. CPS is not meant to protect. Instead, it operates as an institution of coercion and violence. Join ANWO in protest on Friday, August 27th in Portland, Huntsville, Orlando, Pittsburgh, Washington, D.C., Oakland, Philadelphia, and Delaware to demand the end to the state-sponsored kidnapping of African children, expose the parasitic, disgusting nature of the state in the lives of African people, and support African people who are being traumatized on a daily basis. To get more details, email arrestcps@anwouhuru.org or visit our website for updates, anwouhuru.org. www.chairmanomali.org. Many African prisoners have been incarcerated for decades because of their courageous stance in the Black Revolution of the 1960s. On Wednesday, August 25th at 7 p.m. Eastern, join this online event that calls on white activists to uphold these courageous freedom fighters in a way that recognizes African people's struggle for national liberation. Featured speakers include Chairman Omali Yeshitela, leader of the African People's Socialist Party and Worldwide Uhuru Movement, Jihad Abdul Mumit, chair of the Jericho Movement and former political prisoner, John Lamon, political prisoner released in May of 2021 after 37 years in prison, and Penny Hess, chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee. This event is hosted by the African People's Solidarity Committee, the organization of white people working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party to build white solidarity with Black power and unity through reparations. Register for this event at tinyurl.com/politicalprisoners2021. Build Project Black Ankh. Register today and tune in for this important fundraiser to raise awareness and support for Project Black Ankh on Sunday, August 29th at 3 p.m. Central Time. Developed by the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project, Project Black Ankh is the African nation's disaster preparedness and emergency response program, Africa's future in African hands. Register at tinyurl.com/buildpba, that's Build People's Black African PBA, and consider making a donation to this important Project Black On, Lord, and consider making a donation to this important African-led program for self-determination. You are invited to attend the 2021 convention of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. From September 3rd to the 5th, Impedom will be convening a historic convention where we will discuss Black problems and Black solutions made by Black people. We say it's 2021, African Workers Unite, and let's get it done. We are calling on all Africans to join us at 4101 West Florissant Street, St. Louis, Missouri on September 3rd through the 5th, 2021. We will also be live streaming on Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube throughout the weekend. You can register today at tinyurl.com/impedimconvention 2021. And also want to mention that it's the 30-year anniversary of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. So, Uhuru. Order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest books, Vanguard, The Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, and An Uneasy Equilibrium, as well as other works by the chairman and movement leaders at burningspoonmarketplace.com. Like and follow the Lowezi Kinshasa like page on Facebook for more African internationalist political education. Secretary General Lowezi Kinshasa does frequent live events, such as the War of Ideas series. He includes live sessions done in French as well. To get alerts of when Secretary General Lowezi is going live, make sure to like and follow his page today. Tune into White Lies Shattered, the new series of the Reparations in Action podcast featuring Penny Hess, chair of the African People's Solidarity Committee, along with the Uhuru Solidarity Movement chair, Jesse Neville, and its host, Jamie Simpson. Check out the podcast on uhurusolidarity.podbean.com or wherever you listen to podcasts for a series that challenges and exposes the distortion of history by the colonial ruling class and reveals the truth about the past, present, and future from the eyes of the African working class. Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles in Oakland is hiring a full-time truck driver. Do you have driving and furniture lifting skills? Can you work Wednesday through Sunday? If so, then apply for this position and contribute your labor and skills to this institution of the African People's Education and Defense Fund. Every day, you can work with an amazing team and go home knowing that you're helping to build the independent African economy. Uhuru Furniture is just one of the ways APDF is paving the way for genuine economic development in the African community. What do you want your legacy to be? Apply by visiting their website, uhurufurniture.blogspot.com. On Tuesday nights from 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern, join Ralph Pointer on What's Happening Blog Talk Radio. Tune in by calling 347-857-3293. Ralph Pointer sits on the Black is Back Coalition Steering Committee and chairs the BIBC's Political Prisoners Working Group and also leads the Lynn Stewart Committee. And also, we're calling on people to follow the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to the colonial virus COVID-19. APDEP launched an international telehealth program, a free resource for African people to get our COVID-19 related questions and concerns answered by licensed doctors and nurses through Project Black Ankh. You can make your free virtual appointment with one of their professional health providers by going to developmentforafrica.org/telehealth. And to keep up with our movement events, Visit theburningspear.com's events page and subscribe to our mailing list. Next. And make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and donate to PayPal at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. That's it for this week's announcements. We got a lot going on in the Uhuru movement, so go ahead and check us out. Visit theburningspear.com/events to see, all of the events to keep up with everything. So thank you guys for sticking with it while we go through announcements. Now we're getting into the Q&A portion of today's study. And of course, we want to acknowledge where people are watching from. We have Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, St. Louis, Missouri, San Diego, California, St. Petersburg, Florida, Oakland, California, Chicago, Illinois, Lakeland, Florida, Battle Creek, Michigan, Atlanta, Georgia, Nairobi, Kenya, Richmond, Virginia, Brooklyn, New York, Hempstead, New York, Birmingham, Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama, Lawrenceville, Georgia, Occupied Azania or South Africa, Montreal, Canada, Marion County, Georgia, Grenada, North Dakota, Irvington, New Jersey, and Ohio. So Uhuru, guys, thank you for tuning in where you are located. So Chairman, we're going to take some questions that came in from last week that we were not able to get to. This first question came from Truth Seeker D on YouTube, and they asked, Chairman, can you speak on the significance of the U.S. government attack on the Communist Workers' Party USA in November 1979 in North Carolina by the Ku Klux Klan and American Nazi Party, who killed 5 Communist Workers' Party members?
Well, thank you, Comrade Akili, and also Truth Seeker. That's an important question, and it's interesting that 1979, of course, that was the year of the publication of this pamphlet that we are discussing on today, though it was written 2 years prior. That is to say, the material is written 2 years prior. The Communist Workers' Party, I think, was a kind of a consequence of some of the ideological struggles that we were involved in, and certainly from the perspective of the party trying to fight to consolidate the leadership of the pro-independence sector of the African liberation, the anti-colonial sector of the African liberation movement. And I knew Nelson Johnson. His wife was one of the people who was killed in that attack. And we ran in the same circles because in many instances, we were in the same general camp as people who supported the politic of who were followers of Stokely Carmichael, and to some extent supported the politic of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. If I'm not mistaken, Gene Locke, he was one of the others. He was persons he was out of Houston, Texas. And they both, I think, became part of what was known as first Student Organization for Black Unity, and they changed to Youth Organization of Black Unity. And I think that Nelson Johnson was one of those people who attended a meeting that's referenced in this study where people were being drafted into the leadership of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And if I'm not mistaken, at the time he agreed. But obviously some of the same kinds of issues or struggles were there for them, because if he did agree to that, he didn't stay there. We did not agree to it, and there were, political incidents that we can talk about sometime as a consequence of that. But so obviously what we saw was a murderous attack that had the support of the government. There's no doubt about it that the Klan in this instance and the American Nazi Party were acting as instruments of the state, of the colonial state power. In fact, nobody was, if I remember correctly, none of these people who were involved in the killings of those 5 people was actually convicted for the murder. And it was done in broad daylight. There are pictures and what have you associated with that. But it was part of the government, US government effort to crush and make sure that there was no lingering independent revolutionary political expressions, especially coming from the African community And in this instance, of course, with the Communist Workers' Party, even though the killing happened in the middle of the African community, it was some iteration of Marxist Maoist philosophy that brought them to this process. And an instance of where there had been claims and going back and forth between the Klan and the CWP, which was itself recently, I think that year, it had actually consolidated itself as the Communist Workers' Party. They had existed as some other kind of entity prior to that. And the Klan had been dared not to show up in this housing project where Africans lived, and they did show up. It seemed like the CWP had a meaningful kind of following at that time among the people, and the Klan showed up and took the guns out of the vehicles that they were riding in and killed 5 people. And one of whom, as I mentioned earlier, I think was Nelson Johnson's wife. So yeah, it was the US government clearly involved in that process. It was, in some instances, might be seen as a kind of mop-up operation. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know if Truth Seeker, there was anything else associated with that, but I do think that part of what we were looking at is a part of that whole struggle, because during the 1970s, another offensive that was being made against the African liberation movement as an anti-colonial movement for self-determination, liberation of African people globally, was this whole party building movement that saw a lot of white colonial leftists and African people, mostly intellectuals and what have you, critiquing the African Revolution and its weaknesses based on not having appropriately united with certain kinds of Marxist and Maoist analysis. And so the CWP came about in that whole process. And that was part of what we saw as an offensive against the ideological development of the struggle against colonialism and actually muddling the issue. Our conclusion was that capitalism, that the colonial communists claimed to be fighting against, capitalism that the colonial anti-imperialists claimed to be fighting against, capitalism that the colonial socialists and colonial leftists claim to be fighting against, rests upon a foundation of colonialism, and that the strategic interest, the most profound thing that any so-called communist or leftist can do, must do, if what they claim to be fighting for is to come into existence, is they have to fight against colonialism. And they have to do that under the leadership of the colonized ourselves, who are making, who are the foundation, represent the foundation upon which the entire colonial capitalist system rests, or if you will, the capitalist system rests. So I don't know if that was helpful, Truth Seeker, but that's how I remember and understand that with the Communist Workers' Party. And like I said, I knew Nelson. And it's possible I knew some of the other comrades, but Nelson, if I'm not mistaken, had been. There's no doubt he had been to St. Petersburg at conferences that I had organized or the party had organized before the creation of the Communist Workers' Party itself. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Truth Seeker, for your question. Let us know, if all of that was helpful in the comments. And our next question from last week, we had 3 in total, came from Right to Right on YouTube. And they asked, can you speak on the bogus charges being brought up against our INFACT leader, Grandmaster Jay, whose freedom lies in the balance? Respect.
Well, we are fighting against colonialism. And there, I think it's really important for us to understand and remember that law is the opinion of the ruling class, and that while there is an assumption that African people are citizens in this country, that's by law, but that's simply by law. In fact, African people are not citizens. That's why there is such a thing as the organization foundation that Grandmaster Jay created, because there is none there. A problem, I think, I want to suggest also is that at the point where we've, so that's the reality, that the government contrives it and comes up with false claims, false charges, and bogus charges at any instances. And even if they charge us with something that meet the even the colonial constitutional requirements, that they are selective. They create laws, we call them designer laws, just to deal with the colonized, with African people here. They create laws that prohibit, for example, trying a person more than once for the same offense. So that's in their constitution on the one hand, but on the other hand, they create a law called like 3 strikes you out. Which means that we are now imprisoning you, not for just what we're charging you with this time, but for the things you were tried and charged for the other times as well. So it's a matter of colonial convenience, what the law means. And the law, of course, is something that serves the interests of the colonial state. And the state legalizes itself and everything it does at any given moment. So there's no doubt in my mind that it was bogus what happened with Grandmaster Jay, and it's a part of how colonialism works. But I just want to say that when we look at Grandmaster Jay and what happened to him, I mean the whole history of our resistance and struggle is something that's littered with those kinds of incidents. And the greater question now is, with Grandmaster Jay being charged, is there anything like a political organization, political formation that pursues the struggle against colonialism? And was Grandmaster Jay involved in the struggle against colonialism when he was arrested, or was he arrested for a kind of demonstration against some of the symbols of colonialism? Symptoms of colonialism, because the struggle against colonialism has continued. And I don't think we can make the mistake, even when we talk about freeing political prisoners, we have to really understand that we do this in the context of waging this struggle against colonialism, because that's why we have political prisoners, because of this kind of system. So, that's the comments that I would make. What was the comment's name who raised this question?
Their username is right to write.
Right. Yeah, I see that. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And the last question from last week came from Comrade Life. He put this in on Zoom. He said, "Ahuru, Chairman, can you please speak to the direct connection of the institution of religion that the institution of religion has to the material conditions of African workers, and how the anti-colonial criticism of religion is connected to the criticism of the political conditions that give rise to religious aspirations?"
Well, thank you, Comrade Life, for that question. First of all, the question is one that demands a response that says that the African People's Socialist Party is an organization. We are materialists. Our philosophy is based on materialism. We are historical materialists. And so therefore, our objective is to free African people overall, and to free African people under the leadership of the working class, create a whole new social system. And liberating African people, part of that requires us to liberate African people from ideas that enslave us, from superstitions that enslave us, that anything that challenges the reality that African people live in societies that are created by human beings, and that the fight for happiness within those societies require for us to be able, as human beings, to assume responsibility to do that. And while the African People's Socialist Party is an organization of materialists, is based on materialist philosophy, we fight for and defend the right of African people to pursue what generally religious convictions that they may have. And And in most instances, it's those who promote religion most and put them in our communities who are the ones who are trampling on the rights of the people, not because they're religious, but because they're rights, they're the colonized people. So you have no rights, religious or otherwise, under colonialism. So that's one of the reasons the party, which is a materialist organization, will fight and defend the right of the people to practice whatever religious beliefs that we have. But we recognize that in so much of the world and so much of our reality is that people turn to religion in part because they can't find solutions in the world. And what are the solutions to what? To poverty, to misery, to oppression, to early death, to humiliation that we experience all the time. And so we're looking for solutions in the great by and other things like that, satisfactory. And in some extents, it's safer to do this. It's safer to direct religious aspirations, the aspirations in this form. Although there have been instances, as we know, when Africans, like any other oppressed people, would take a belief system that's been imposed on us by even an oppressor and take that belief system and try to make it serve our own interests. Nat Turner took that belief system and as a child growing up, African people, in my experience, would push toward Christianity because it appeared to be the religion of the oppressed. It was the religion of the oppressed. It was not something that Donald Trump could use and step out and hold up a Bible, or George Bush, or any of these other persons like that. It was the religion of the oppressed that was what motivated and mobilized us. But to the point where a movement, especially in a weakened state, you see, or chaotic state, religion and idealism, philosophical idealism, the assumption that there's something separate from society, above society, above human beings, that creates everything, creates the society, creates the world, creates solutions to the world. And then that is something that helps to disarm masses from our own responsibility to make the kind of world we want to live in, and to destroy the world that's been imposed on us by our oppressors. The heaven that we seek is to be one on earth, and that is through destroying a social system based on colonial capitalism, and to create another system that empowers the people, so the people look for solutions within our own communities, within our own capacity, within our own people. So I hope that was helpful, Comrade Life. Uhuru.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Life. Just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep going with the questions, Chairman, because there are a lot. So Comrade Matsamela in San Diego asks, Uhuru, Chairman, our African Liberation Day work is tied to our tactics and strategies for liberation. It's in this position that the difference between the party and the AAPRP was revealed. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, the thing is that certainly the way this discussion and the struggle, the polemics that we were involved in with the AAPRP revolved immediately and directly around the African Liberation Day. And certainly there was a whole different approach to this question by the AAPRP and the African People's Socialist Party. Some of this is talked about in this document, but there are other aspects of it that didn't make the document. For example, I mentioned that I was a member of the original 1972 founding of the African Liberation Day Coordinating Committee. And it was a committee that Stokely and people who would become the All African People's Revolutionary Party would not participate in. They had their own political reasons for doing that, a political line for doing that. And everything that we have done historically has been tied to undermining colonialism, empowering the African, and especially the African liberation movement, and building the capacity of the African working class in its own revolutionary organization, everything that we've ever done. And so that was how we took on this whole approach. So otherwise, what the AAPRP was doing, they were having magnificent annual demonstration in Washington, D.C., where they would have people from the Palestinian Liberation Organization and various other kinds of entities including the indigenous people in this country were speaking on those platforms. But they had nothing. There was no revolutionary participation from African people, especially in this country. There might be representation from African liberation movement on the continent, but there was nothing that addressed the specific contradictions that Africans were experiencing in this country. And we felt like the US is the critical force that has to be defeated if in fact Africa and African people are going to be liberated. That this has been the anchor for this entire social system, and we've worked like that. And so that's all of our work has been connected to undermining colonial capitalism, strengthening and the struggle against colonialism. And part of that for a long period of time revolved around uniting all of those forces who were opposed to colonialism and in the process. So Comrade Masamela, and those are things that distinguished our approach to this whole question of African Liberation Day. Was not, just to have a big march and a celebration except, but we can be celebratory. We can have big marches, and we should, to the extent that we can do those kinds of things. But for us, it was really important to be connected to the liberation of our people, overturning the system, identifying what the contradictions are for Africans in the United States and around the world. And AAPRP never did that. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you, Comrade Matsamela, for your question. He has several questions, but we're gonna have to go to other people. Uhuru, so this question comes from Comrade Soliana in Virginia, and she asks, Uhuru, how does the historic relationship between the party and AAPRP affect its current, how has this historic relationship between the party and AAPRP affected its current relationship?
I can't answer that question effectively. I mean, we're the same organization we've always been. We've sought the same unity, generally speaking, that we've always sought. I know that there have been particular kinds of things that we've attempted to have participation from the AAPRP in. And I think as recently as last year or something, we have not had any success in, but it's not something we actively pursue in the same way anymore, because we've come to certain kinds of conclusions about what it's going to take to make this revolution. And the class question, again, as we say, even in the struggle for national liberation, the class struggle is raging. And we believe that the class is the class contradiction that that made it impossible for the unity that we sought with the AAPRP to occur. So we've accepted responsibility in the African People's Socialist Party to lead the revolutionary struggle, not just here, but generally speaking, globally. We've accepted that responsibility and don't assume that the AAPRP will be a factor in making that happen or not. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Soliana, for your question. And our next question comes from Comrade Kumba and in St. Louis, and he asks, Uhuru, I'm on the plantation, but Chairman, do you foresee a possible future call by the party to groups like this again, making a call for one party?
The answer to that question, Comrade Kumba, I don't foresee it. I mean, I can't anticipate everything that's going to happen in the world. I mean, we worked for a long time, Kumba, on this. And the AAPRP was just one of the formations. We thought it was a really important formation, but there are others, who we sought to unite with. One of whom, for example, when it comes to African Liberation Day, perhaps in one of these that's being discussed in this pamphlet, was a just horribly disappointment because they ran into AAPRP sectarianism. And they had come to the conclusion that since the AAPRP would not allow them to speak on AAPRP platforms, that they were going to participate in an African Liberation Day demonstration that was being done by the organization that came to be known as the Revolutionary Communist Party. We thought that was the most ridiculous anti-revolutionary, something that went against the whole question of liberation from our people, and had problems with that. So I can't see it, Kumba. I mean, not at this point. I just think, like I've said, the history of the African People's Socialist Party went through an entire party building process. And part of the party building process that we went through included the work that we did to try to bring the APRP, the Republic of New Africa, the African People's Party, and an arm wing of our struggle into a single party. And we are here where we are now as the African People's Socialist Party as a part of the consequence of that. It's not like let's do it several times. The consequence of all of these struggles is what has come to create the DNA, define who we are as a party, and define the African Revolution. And the African Revolution is something that has been on a continuum, and the party has kept it on that continuum. You will find the last 50 years of history of the African Revolution to be concentrated in the African People's Socialist Party. And that's why you can find Lumumba and Nkrumah and Malcolm and other manifestations of our liberation struggle and politics inside the African People's Socialist Party in the various places that the party is located in the world. So I don't see that, Kumba. I think the party is here. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, thank you. And thank you, Kumba, for your question. We'll go ahead and just take one more, Chairman, and then we'll wrap it up. So this one came from Comrade Kemu in Birmingham, Alabama. And he asked, could we consider timing and the ground situation as factors to unity? To or for unity, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's the case. I mean, that's the case. And, you know, see, unity for what? To what end are we talking about unity? I mean, even going back to what comment, well, not Kuma mentioned coming into one party. The party is here. That's something that everybody needs to accept. The party is here. And whether forces want to try to join the party, there are processes through which individuals and groups might be able to do to join the party. The party is here. In terms of time and place for unity, the unity for what? So there are things that people there in Birmingham, Alabama, for example. There was a person who claims to be running for mayor and claimed to believe in the basic principles that have been put forward by the Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations as a part, from our perspective, of uniting the broad mass of African people in the struggle against colonialism. And so there's a national Black political agenda for self-determination that everybody who's running for office can unite with or not. If they unite with it, they can perhaps achieve an endorsement from this coalition. And so, we say that the time is now. I mean, so this person, they're running for office, you want this endorsement, you can get this endorsement, which is a form of unity within the African Liberation Movement. There's 17 organizations as a part of the Black is Black Coalition. We can unite, but the unity is based on the national Black political agenda for self-determination, not on the aspirations of some Negro to get elected. And of course, once the person accepted the endorsement and the small contribution that was made to the campaign, they decided that the question of unity with Palestine was something they couldn't handle. And even though it had been raised previously, we had explained it, they decided they couldn't do that. So there's no unity there, Kemu, right there where you are in Birmingham. There's no unity there. So unity for what? That's the question. Time, place, and unity for what? And toward what end? That's the question that we are constantly looking at and fighting for. Uhuru. So yeah, unity, time, and place is all critical. I mean, all things that happen in the world, in the real world, happen within the context of time and place. Unity, disunity, all of that happens within the context of time and place. Uhuru.
Thank you, Kemu, for your question. And Chairman, that's going to be the last that we take today, but just bear in mind that we do have lots of questions left over from today's study. And I know that there will be more as we continue to go through this pamphlet, but I do want to turn it over to you just for, any closing remarks before we.
I just want to, really express appreciation, and we're a long way today from the time when this pamphlet was written, but the level of, I think, of political consciousness and development was higher at that point than I think it is now, and or rather than that, people don't have a memory of that period. The party does have a memory. That's what we're talking about. This is a memory for the liberation movement. It's not just our memory. The fact that we've written it down, the fact that we made these struggles and we make them available. This is the way that the anti-colonial movement, the movement for revolutionary conclusion, overturning of a social system and bringing about a new world. The memory is there through the things that we've written, and the thing is right here concentrated in the African People's Socialist Party. And that's the reason that we involved in this discussion, so that people don't have to be locked into this place of social media militancy with immediate things being the determining factor for how we understand the world. The thing is to show the world and the history of how processes develop. You can't understand something just by looking at phenomena as it is today, knowing something about the history of that phenomenon. And I'm not just talking about the history of the relationship between the African People's Socialist Party and the AAPRP, but the whole struggle, knowing something about that informs us better. And the party provides that memory for the African liberation movement. As I said, the struggle for our movement has this continuum as a consequence of the existence of the African People's Socialist Party. We're here, and Lumumba is here, and Malcolm is here, and the whole revolutionary project is here as a consequence of the existence of our party. Thank you, comrades. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, I just want to again thank you so much for bringing this pamphlet to us today to study, because it is really important to see this history, to be able to have this in the context of the period that we're in today, to be able to teach new members of our movement coming into this process, how to struggle and how to build, how to win. And this is just a really critical piece in understanding, these questions that are being, raised. So thank you so much, Chairman. I'm excited to continue on with part 2 next Sunday. And I just also want to extend a thank you to everybody who tuned in, and we want to encourage you to like and subscribe to the Burning Spirit TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and continue to support the OTM show by donating to paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, everybody. Uhuru, see you next Sunday.